thanks so much for inviting me. Very excited to be here and share my insights from working on AI for a long time before it became so hot. Just super quickly, as I say it, maybe semi-cynically, I worked on those quote-unquote esoteric topics like LLM and AI technologies long before it became the hottest thing on earth. But more on a serious note, one of kind of things that I'm very excited about is that I was part of what we call two waves of AI, or two recent waves of AI. The first wave of AI started roughly in 2015 when Google understood that we have a breakthrough on a software level that allow those deep neural network models that we now call LLMs to process insane amount of training data and apply it and productize it at scale. So the first product that I had a privilege leading called Google Translate, Google Translation product, it was the first product ever that introduced and productized what we now call LLMs. At that time we called deep neural networks at scale. We launched it in 2016. It was a huge jump in quality of translations, and it was launched across more than 1 billion users. We did 140 billion translations every single day. So it was a huge scale, and it was done. We believed it will take us 3 years to launch it. We launched it in 9 months because we believed it will be a huge, it will start this AI revolution. And I'm so happy to realize now that we were so right. If any of you interested in the history of AI, there is a very good article called The Great AI Awakening from New York Times from November 2016, what we announced when we launched it. We realized it will be this revolutionary moment in AI development, and we actually allowed the New York Times correspondent reporter under embargo work with us for 6 months as we were launching and productizing this product. That led to another big breakthrough, Transformer paper. The fun part about that story is that those 8 researchers that now called Magnificent 8 that authored the Transformer paper, many of them worked with us on launching translations. And they actually realized that after this big jump in quality, that was amazing. We achieved the biggest jump in translation quality in versus previous 10 years of Google Translate combined. But they understood they're peaking because you basically exhausted amount of training data you have. And they thought about a better way to do it, which was flexible attention. That's why the paper is called Attention is What You Need. And when you read this paper, you see a lot of examples about translations because that was the use case at that time. So they published that paper. That to me was kind of the first wave. But one of the challenges during that time was that you did not have compute. Anyone, including people like OpenAI that was just starting, and Ilya Sutskever, obviously one of the co-authors of the paper. But more importantly, you also do not have what is called pre-training data. You don't have enough training data to use it. So Google actually tackled both of those when we're launching Translate. One is we tackled what we call today GPU problem, that GPUs were at that time slow, especially on inference, on serving time. When we were launching Google Translate, the GPUs were 100 times slower in processing the information versus our production systems that was not on deep neural networks. So Google was forced to develop TPUs, what is now called TPUs. It's basically Google custom chip. And obviously, I'm very happy to hear that, and to see that Jensen from NVIDIA took the feedback really well. Instead of being upset, he basically wanted to learn what exactly is needed. And he tripled down on making GPUs support AI era. And we are seeing all this feedback now. But the other thing that I think Google contributed to society and to AI society and AI industry was the training data, because the first product that used what we now call LLMs, first model was called BERT, bidirectional encoders based on transformers, that was launched, I believe, in 2018. And what Google did, it was a very controversial move. We open sourced both the model weights, but also the training data. And the training data, because Google obviously has a lot of training data from the internet and from user actions, that was the biggest breakthroughs that allowed OpenAI with their own additional innovations like RLHF and other things to basically be able to launch GPT-1 and GPT-2 and GPT-3. And that's basically led to the current wave of AI, which is democratizing access to AI. So I'm extremely proud and honored to be part of those both waves. The first wave that was maybe short-lived, but it was super important stepping stone and foundation to what we're having now. In terms of my other background, as Henry said, I was VP of AI at Cisco, was Chief Product and Technology Officer in a computer vision startup, and before that was also in Microsoft and PayPal. I'm also operating advisor in Bessemer, which is one of the premier venture funds, and I am partnering with boards and advising boards on large-scale transformation to the AI era. And that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, given my experience, to talk about the transformations that each one of us and all industries will go through. So I'm basically sharing my thoughts mostly from my previous experience about working on AI for a very, very long time. So one thing I wanted to mention is that even though it sounds amazing and new and cutting edge, it's basically a stepping stone in a very long list of scientific and technological breakthroughs, starting from, fire and wheel and, and printing press and electricity. That's why I think we need to take it into perspective and understand that the excitement and the challenges we're facing today with AI transformation are not new. They happened before in other technological waves. It might be happening way faster than before, but there is a lot of parallels to what happens today. So one thing I want to emphasize, that real transformation is always people plus process plus technology, in that order. So transformation, it's basically also changing user behavior and changing enterprise behavior, changing the workflows we all do to adjust it to amazing foundations or amazing technological breakthrough that AI is introducing. I also wanted to emphasize that this disruption, technological disruption, it's never coming easy. It's always a painful process, but people need to realize that there is a lot of fear among people about the technology. And it hasn't started now. It started, there was, a ludist movement in the 80s, right? And I really like that example. It's actually relevant to mobility in cars. It's a quote from Professor Scott Galloway, who is a serial entrepreneur, teaches marketing in, I believe, in New York, in Columbia, I believe. So he talks about specifically examples that technology is introduced, says a car, an existing sector is becoming irrelevant. For example, horses and carriages, right? In the short term, the society is really fixated about how many horses or carriages will be out of job, and it's important. But what's important to understand is the amount of value and amount of new jobs are being created, new use cases are being created with new technology. So if you talk specifically about that, how many jobs the cars will create, because when you start with disruptive technology, you don't even know what use cases, what business models and technologies that will create. And he gives us example of, hard to envision radios, turn signal lights, motion sensors, heated seats, let alone NASCAR, right? All those things that create a ton of new industry, a ton of new jobs. You cannot even predict it because your entire industry is being appended and being done completely different. In other words, disruptive technology results in demand for things we never knew we wanted. And that's a really powerful quote because, we all know that every technological advancement creates a huge wealth creation and quality of life for everyone, maybe in a different scale for different types of society, but for everyone. Look at the expectancy of life today versus, 17th, 18th, 19th century. Definitely technology has a positive impact, but the change is hard. But what people don't realize is change in many cases means there'll be new jobs, new business cases, new opportunities created, but the change will take time. And that's what people need to be preparing for. Back to my point, like every disruption unlocks new value in jobs, right? So if you look at global GDPs, that's one of the examples, pretty flat or like stable growth. And then from industrial revolution, we have a huge jump in GDP. And it's not only GDP, it's life expectancy, it's life quality for everyone. So that's the huge promise of every technology wave, including AI. But there's obviously also this cycles that there are always a disruption and always adaptation and then a new opportunity, right? So if we look even in the recent history and we look at emails, right? Emails definitely disrupted mail industry. Way less mails or physical letters are being sent, right? But there was a huge pivot to parcels, right? And e-commerce, right? Drove in industry growth and value, revenue and employment. So yes, there was a shift in skills. There was a shift in employment sectors, but at the end of the day, the net was huge wealth creation and also huge employment creation for the society. I also want to emphasize one additional thing, and that's I really like that example in this quote for Steve Jobs. AI, as every technology, is enhancing human skills versus replacing human skills. And Steve Jobs talked about this a while ago when he started the PC revolution, which I believe is actually a very good analogy to AI revolution, because people, in my opinion, in many cases use wrong analogies. So what he said is that when we invented the personal computer, we created a new kind of bicycle for our minds. What he meant by that is that if you put all all animals and all species in the world, including humans, and try to measure how fast they run or fly, humans are not that great, right? They're like, yes, they're faster than a turtle, but they're way, way slower than a cheetah, or way, way, slower than a bird or eagle, for example. But if the beauty of our mind that we create a technology like bicycle or car or plane that will make us way faster, way more powerful, way stronger than any other species. So that's his example of man-machine partnership that allow humans to be faster than a cheetah. And to me, I think it's the crux of technological breakthroughs, and frankly, very relevant for AI revolution as well. So talking about productivity shift, not job shift, unfortunately, a lot of people, including execs, including people that coming, to Wall Street, because Wall Street in many cases focus on short term, they focus on what I call an offshoring effect. They think that AI and machines are a new offshoring, meaning let's fire a bunch of expensive people in, in the US and hire a bunch of cheap people in Philippines, India, etc. They basically look at AI machines as cheap humans, but it's a completely wrong way to look at it, because machines are not humans. And that's overly simplistic view to look at it. I think AI is way more, as I mentioned in Steve Jobs example, like switching from paper to digital, right? What it means is that if you think about what happened when we switched from paper to digital, we need to completely change every workflow we do. How people, produce documents, how they type them, how they send them. Everything was changed. And most importantly, everybody had to get at least some kind of computer literacy. Computer literacy is like, using, Outlook and email. And in some cases, for some jobs, you actually need computer proficiency, meaning, for example, in case of mobility or car design, you needed to learn how to use CAD tools. Before that, it was used very differently, right? And I think that's what people fail to realize, that it's a very good analogy. Another thing I believe people fail to realize is how many skills, computer skills, or like digital skills, we acquired during the years that we don't realize. It started in the 1990s, where the focus was on word processing, and everybody today knows how to use Word. Then in 2000, there was an internet revolution, and we learned how to use internet and search. In 2010s, we learned how to use mobile and apps. And it sounds organic to us today, but it took time for people to learn. I still remember maybe 10, 15 years ago, the resumes you would get, in bold, proficient in MS Word, proficient in MS Windows, proficient in MS Excel. And it sounds silly today, but in the past, it was very relevant because it was a skill that you acquired and it gave you a leg up versus other candidates. So I believe that it's a really important analogy and a really important understanding that everyone, in every tech leap, everyone needs to learn new skills, not for the sake of using the tech, but being able to use innovation, creativity, collaboration, speed, everything that modern workplace requires today, and AI will make it even more collaborative, even more interactive, and more faster. But the key is to make sure people learn those skills. And if you look today back to 1990s, 30, 35 years ago, yes, it was a gradual process. But I mean, people now don't say, oh my God, it was so difficult, it was so painful to learn how to use Word. Yes, for some people it's harder for others. But at the end of the day, the key is every user will need to learn to have at least AI literacy, and for some functions, AI proficiency. So how you do it if you switch to enterprise? I'm a chief AI officer of a big company. It's actually amazing. GM was founded 115 years old. It was founded in 1910. There's very few companies that were able to adapt and innovate for so long time. If you look at Fortune 500 150 years ago, very few companies remain. So how you scale an AI and how you stay relevant and thriving in this AI era from enterprise perspective, I believe what you need to do to scaling AI and transforming all of us for AI requires what I call a flywheel, which is both top down and bottom up. So I will start from the top, and it's self-reinforcing cycle. From the top, it's very important to set a clear vision and goals. And I'm working very closely with Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, who is amazing in that front, and the board and the leadership team, to set clear vision and goals, and also empower team to be owning the idea that they need to start learning and adopting AI tools. And then very important, also celebrate successes. What it means is that you take a project that might not be the most impactful tomorrow, I call it quick wins, but it actually allows people to learn about AI, because there's a lot of fear and people fear of unknown the most, right? So celebrating success is very important. Take a project that might not be the most impactful or will not have a huge business value immediately, but it's really important to drive the success and celebrate the success. And I will tell why it's so important. If you go back to the bottom part, you have what I call identify and support internal champions. What it means is that, as you probably know, in every organization, technology will change, different people react to it differently. So today we have people who are AI enthusiasts, you have people who are AI curious, and you have people who are AI skeptics. They could be AI skeptics, they could be AI fearful. You need to find and embrace people who are internal champions that are excited to try and excited to test AI. The next thing you need to do, you need to, what we call in the baseball jargon, encourage at bats. Encourage trial and sometimes error. This is new technology. The new processes needs to be developed. People don't know how to do it. But the key is to try and be also a bit tolerant for mistakes. I mean, especially mistakes related that, you don't know how to use the technology well, because nobody does, frankly. But it's important to understand it's an iterative testing, trial and error, more art than science today process, and finally land those quick wins. As I said, it's important to identify them, and going back to self-reinforcement cycle, it's important to land them relatively quickly and celebrate successes. And the reason I want to emphasize that and give you maybe a classical example to me from my time at Google is that at Google, we developed a technology that is predicting what video you will watch next. And we went to core YouTube team, and it was extremely complex project. There was a lot of things to figure out to do it on a core YouTube property. Then we decided to try it on a smaller property called YouTube Music. That was a smaller team, way smaller impact, because YouTube Music is like 1/10 of the revenue of core YouTube. But they were very nimble, interested, and frankly hungry team, because I have a huge competition from Spotify. And we started with them. They were our champions. And the moment it landed, it's like overnight was a roughly 30% increase in listen time. They became our biggest champions. They went probably from their own self-interest. A lot of those people got promoted significantly, but they went and talked about anywhere. This was before AI was, so hot as today. They talk anyone to the companies that was willing to listen, all the execs, that AI is amazing and this technology is amazing, and we all should embrace it. So it was a great learning to me that this flywheel of top down and bottom up is so important, and it's really important to find those quick wins. And I will expand on it a little bit more, how you find the right project. But that's, to me, this self-reinforcing cycle is very critical, especially landing quick wins and celebrating early successes is extremely critical. So another approach is to look at this in I like a positive spin-off instead of crawl, walk, run, talking about rooftops, moonshots, and Mars travel, right? So in the short term, you basically try to empower and excite every team across the company. You give them access to AI tools and encourage them to try and to play with them, and focus on executing and landing those quick wins, right? Then you start looking at moonshots, a bit more complex, or very complex, where you can, speaking of AI language, you start deploying domain-specific AI models rooted on proprietary data for your specific functions. It could be supply chain, it could be vehicle design, etc. So that's kind of near term 1 to 2 years. And then you start laying foundation for disruption. What I call Mars travel is like how you can actually reimagine some of the core company functions, right, with this AI transformation. And different industries obviously have different core functions, right? But that's to me kind of to some extent, a blueprint how I recommend in a practical way to look and kind of phase in AI deployments and AI transformation. And just to clarify, you work on all of them at once. You just have different time horizon for each. Okay, so why quick wins are so important? So I gave you an example of YouTube and YouTube Music, right? So why quick wins are so important? First of all, they help create this internal momentum and empowers those AI champions, AI enthusiasts to become those champions. As I gave you an example, people really were routing. It was a small team, but they spoke and everyone at Google how amazing it is, right? Another important thing, as I mentioned, people are extremely fearful of unknown, right? A lot of people today hearing all those stories, hearing all those news, here's Wall Street asking how many jobs you'll cut tomorrow, like what are the cost savings you'll get tomorrow, and a lot of execs talking about it. It's all about offshoring. It's all about getting rid of people, which is completely the wrong way to look at it. The key is to teach people new skills, and there is no better way to teach a new skill if a functional leader in your org, in my case, let's say finance as an example, talks about what he did with AI, and people are, oh, I can see how it can help me. I should learn this skill. I should learn those tools. That's to me one of the biggest things. Now, as I mentioned, it's really important to define quick wins correctly. The first one is that it's a meaningful impact on a local level. It doesn't have to be immediately on a functional group level or company level, right? I gave an example of YouTube Music. For them, it was huge. 30% increase of listen time over time. But for overall YouTube or for Google, it was not that big because it was like, hundreds of millions versus billions or tens of billions in revenue, right? But it was super impactful for them, right? Also, I think it's very critical that project will not be on a critical path, right? Because critical paths usually complex and the stakes are hard. We need to understand that this technology is new. This technology is moving very quickly. Technology makes mistakes. AI hallucinates. So you don't start on super high stakes, high risk use cases. You start on use cases that are not on critical paths. Again, my example of YouTube and YouTube Music is very relevant here. It was super complex to do it on YouTube proper. You need to pay creators and you have legal and other things, right? So this extra complexity can really, really inhibit success and give ammunition to those people who are AI skeptics, right? And finally, the key is really this fast progress, and learning is really key to generate this early momentum. And I want to emphasize, early momentum, in my opinion, is way more important than immediately show huge impact, because it's a transformation. You're transforming the workflows, you're transforming people, you're teaching people new skills. It takes time, right? You need to bring the enterprise organization with you and show them that this technology helps them, not replacing them. So some additional thoughts about how you can enable this transformation, right? So as I mentioned, it's really important to activate this internal momentum around AI, how you identify and empower and celebrate those champions. How do you channel this enthusiasm about AI with grassroots energy? It could be, internal incubators. It could be internal competitions of people bringing AI ideas and trying to execute on them. And it's really important from the top to the bottom to celebrate wins and embrace this failing forward experiments, right? That's what I worked a lot with Mary and my leadership team, who are really big champions for that, to also celebrate those successes. The next one is you need to advance AI first capabilities and develop this AI literacy, right? Through structured organization, training, and development journey. You need to really invest in those. There's a lot of those tools. They're complex. That sounds deceivingly simple. It's just a chatbot, but it's not. And frankly, in my opinion, chatbots, it's overrated interface. There's way better interface, right? And you also need to equip teams with those tools to innovate safely, quickly, and at scale. For example, we are rapidly building what we call AI platform to allow people to access safe and approved repository of models, allow to train, get the data in that could be used for training, allow people to fine-tune and train the models quickly, and most importantly, very underrated, evaluate the models, because it's very easy to say, oh, the model is great, I tested it with two people. But now there'll be a lot of edge cases that will not work. And it's very important to understand how well your model is, how well it's ready for wide deployment and production. And finally, lead with an AI mindset. I mentioned this, you need AI literacy, and in some places you need AI proficiency. You need to reimagine the collaboration between humans and AI across those core functions, right? You need to align those AI capabilities with strategic goals to unlock this transformational impact. It takes time, but as I said, it's people, process, technology, and that order. You need to think about your workflows and reimagine them over time, how AI can actually help people to be more proactive, focus on way more high value activities, and how you actually teach people and bring people along with you on those things. So I also wanted to mention that, like, those are examples from Copilot. People in many cases, as I mentioned, there is overly simplistic, in my opinion, very wrong and very dangerous view of AI, that it's all about cost saving. It's all about getting rid of people, right? But it's actually not true. There is so many other value that AI brings that is so important. For example, customer service, right? This is Copilot examples. So I'll give you even better examples. Higher sales, better conversion rates in marketing, better accuracy in answering questions on self-service, reduction in cost resolution time, reduction in external spend for external legal counsels, increase in self-help success in IT. And actually, I wanted to quote one very interesting research that I think was jointly by Stanford and Berkeley. They measured impact of AI copilots in customer support, relatively simple customer support use case. And what they found out, there were productivity gains, roughly 15%. People expected more. I actually think 15% in highly optimized industry, it's a lot. But most importantly, they found a huge jump in customer satisfaction. And the reason for that, that what they discovered actually is the productivity and customer satisfaction increased mostly among new customer support agents, and let's call it average skill set customer support agent, because it actually raised the floor. AI raised the floor with this Copilot, draft response, because it effectively made every average agent, a new agent, a very good agent. And the difference between very good and average agent is not that much, you could think, but has huge impact on customer satisfaction. What they found out is that, in highly process-driven industry, very good customer support agent just have an open mind and literally heard and compiled a list of phrases that help them in different use cases. For example, if a person is upset, if a customer is upset, how do you soothe them? How do you calm them down? By saying something, oh my God, I totally understand how you feel. I would feel exactly like you, instead of giving them, corporate copy-paste phrase, right, that approved, right? If you need to upsell or cross-sell the service, you find phrases that work effectively, and you literally have a spreadsheet on your computer, which is frankly very similar to Copilot, but Copilot can do it so much more effective, right? And other things they found out, where there's a huge customer satisfaction, is the things that a lot of, in customer support, using that example, we all speak our industry lingo that might not be applicable or understood by average Joe on the street. And as an example, if you're a Verizon customer technical support person and you got a call from 70-year-old senior citizen that needs help in restarting his internet or restarting his router, if you start speaking lingo that he doesn't understand, it will not go well. I will give you two very interesting examples that I personally experienced. The first one was on my personal level. I have an 11-year-old that I'm trying to make interested in finance and investing. And I explained it to him. He literally could not care less. Then I went to ChatGPT and said, explain the notion of financial investing to 11-year-old. And he immediately told them, oh, what if you would invest and be able to buy new, Nintendo Switch in 6 months? Really piqued his interest, right? But I actually have a very powerful example from my Google Translate days. When we launched Google Translate in 2016, we got a lot of praise and a lot of feedback from people, from press, from users, letters, faxes, you name it. And one of the calls came from Dean of Harvard Medical School. And he wanted to talk to us about improving medical translation. And as a background, he sent us a memo from Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Public Health, discouraging doctors to use Google Translate or those online translation agents, especially in hospital and medical field, but especially in ER, in emergency rooms. And the reason is sometimes they could be wrong, which is totally true. And they gave a couple of examples, and one example that really cracked me out. The example was that it was a case of a seasonal Mexican worker, 60-year-old Mexican workers that were doing some agricultural work in rural Massachusetts, and he got heart attack on the job, and he was rushed to a small ER in the middle of Massachusetts, and the doctor stabilized him, and the seasonal worker wife, who is Mexican and also illiterate. She speaks only Spanish, but she cannot read. She cannot read even in Spanish. So she sits in the waiting room and waiting for the doctor to come out. So the doctor come out, realizes that she doesn't speak English, so he pulls Google Translate and talks to her and tells her, "Your husband had a cardiac arrest." And Google Translate translated it to, "Your husband's heart is in prison." And after I finished laughing, Dean of Harvard Medical School told me, the problem is not translation. The problem is that doctors are speaking a freaking language that nobody can understand. How does, let's say this woman would know English. What the heck is cardiac arrest? How is she supposed to know what it is, right? So can you please help me? I don't need, foreign language translation. Can you please help me to develop a translation that will translate medical English to plain English? And that's, to me, a really good example of another big customer satisfaction driver that AI can really help. But to summarize the slide, there is so many more value creation in AI. It could be faster time to market. It could be better ROI on marketing spend. It could be better customer satisfaction. It could be better employee satisfaction. There is a ton of research that shows that, for example, all the coding assistant people, a lot of developers, especially good ones, really like it because it allows them to focus on way more creative work about designing something versus researching how do I port this code from, I don't know, Python to Java, as an example, right? I think it's extremely important, and in many cases, not very emphasized aspect of AI that it creates so much value well beyond, cost savings or productivity gains. So I'm sorry, I think I have some issues with images here, but basically, on a high level, it's important to provide support across the entire AI, what we call stack. From one end, from the top, you have best practices such as consulting, co-develop with your V1 as needed, right? So for example, support complex to start AI project with deep AI expertise. You might have a project that is simple for a person like me, but people in the trenches don't know how to start. So in many cases, we maybe co-start the project. I put a small number of people to jumpstart the project and then transition into the functional team. Next one, I mentioned a little bit about the platform. It's the productivity tools and domain-specific apps, right? For example, empowering the org with some AI tools. For example, simple one is Microsoft Copilot in our case, or Google Gemini, to actually help not only drive AI impact, but actually help with what I constantly call AI literacy. That's the most common denominator tools that people could start using. And finally, create repository of models that are safe to use, safe to evaluate, compute infrastructure and data. Ideally, you basically provide the streamlined abstract platform type of access to those best-in-class models, evals, and compute in a safe, consistent, and secure manner. So basically, kind of a quick summary and take-home points. So as I say, the pace of artificial intelligence is accelerating and will absolutely reshape this landscape across the board, right? Next one is that the beauty of this new wave of AI revolution that it's started with ChatGPT launch is that literally democratize access to AI, right? It's becoming cheaper, easier, and especially easier UI-wise to access and use those models. And how now it created a huge investment in AI. So basically we have multiple models, including models that I call multimodal, meaning they now can understand and generate text, they can generate images, they can generate and understand videos, very important, right? Next one is there is an accelerating uptake of AI, not only in consumer space like ChatGPT, but also in the workplace, right? And as I said, it will reshape how business and individuals operate, right? Building this AI literacy is really critical. It's a new chapter in this journey. Because as an example, from paper to word processing to apps to mobile to now AI, it's this journey that you need to develop the skills to thrive in this new world, right? Quick wins, in my opinion, is very important to transform organizations, right? And if you do many of them, even if they're small, there is a compounding effect that will lead to large and very material impact. And finally, there is a lot of technological hurdles to overcome, which is generally, yes, they're complex, but they're easier. The real big factor is the change management, basically how you take people and workflows and processes and change them and transform them to bring the organization towards this new thriving era, high productivity, high satisfaction era of AI. That's it. Those are my slides. It looks like I finished 5 minutes early on my side, but I'm hopefully enjoyed it, and best of luck in this amazing journey of AI transformation.
Barak, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, and particularly on how to enable transformation with AI. That's very inspiring. And that's all the time we have for today. If you missed any part of today's presentation, it will be made available on UMTRI YouTube on Tuesday, September 30th. And as a reminder, we are hosting the UMTRI Symposium on Thursday, October 2nd at Michigan Union, which will include a panel focused on AI for transportation. The panel will be moderated by Professor Yapeng Yin at the University of Michigan. And also our speakers will include Greg Bruner from the Michigan Department of Transportation, CJ King from Talk Robotics, and Professor Xiaozhu Mei from University of Michigan School of Information, and Dr. Wenbo Sun from UMTRI. You can register now by scanning the QR code online. You can see from the screen. And thank you for joining us for today. And we hope that you all have a great rest of your day and your weekend. Thank you.